I've been working for the Dodge Brothers since the beginning, and that was back in 1900 when they started making automobile parts for ransom mules. I built the engines that were sold to Henry Ford when he started producing his cars in 1910. I was there for all of the big events of the Dodge Brothers and even a few after they were gone. But forget all of what I just said, I should introduce myself. My name's Eugene Williams and I am 46 years old. I've been working for the Dodge Brothers since I was 18. That's 28 long years of successful service to the Dodge Brothers industry. I have served and it was a pretty great 28 years. But why don't I start from the beginning now? In 1900, I had just turned 18 years old and was looking for a better paying job than working on the neighbor's farm. I had experience with metalworking from my dad and who had a small blacksmithing shop. So I went to the big city of Detroit, Michigan to try and look for a job. I saw the ad on the window of the general store that said the Dodge Brothers were hiring people to fill castings for the engine blocks and for assembling the motors. I went straight to their factory and asked about the job. I talked to the secretary lady in the office when I got to the factory and asked about the job openings. She had told me there were two openings available yet, and they were for the casting fillings and the engine assembly. I had told her I'd like to try for the engine assembly. After that, I had to wait for someone to come and get me and go over what I knew and what I had to learn to do this job. I pretty much knew what I was doing because I had experience helping my neighbor with his steam-powered tractor. It was somewhat similar but not an internal combustion engine like I would be working on. After showing the man that came and got me what I knew, he said he said I would be an excellent man to work in this plant and said I could start working tomorrow morning. Then he shook my hand and introduced himself as Horace Dodge, one of the owners of the factory. I was so excited to get this job and just thought about the money I would be making being able to work alongside Horace and John Dodge. I have been building engines for the Dodge Brothers for 10 years now, and I have become very successful at doing it. But in 1910, John and Horace broke their contract with Ford to start producing for Henry Ford and his new car, the Model T. Now we would be building motors for Henry Ford and ransom mules, but with the mass production Ford was asking for, we would need to expand and gain more workers to keep up to his demands. Soon after, John and Horace opened up a Hamtramck plant to keep up with Ford's demands. They asked me to be the head engine builder. I was so excited for them to ask me to be the head engine builder, and I even got a raise along with it. The Hamtramck plant basically was a giant plant that had an assembly line for each piece that was made, and some of the pieces all met up at the end and were bolted onto other pieces that were made throughout the factory. But there was one problem. Henry Ford didn't have the money at the time to pay for the Dodge Brothers for all the parts. So instead of giving them money, he gave them 10% of the company, so they would get a portion of what Henry Ford made for all of the parts he needed. So it was a great partnership for a while, but it would soon end with the Dodge Brothers' competitiveness. In 1914, John and Horace planned on trying to make their own car to compete with Ford. They ended their contract with Ford, which basically cut him off for parts to build his cars, just so they could focus on their own car. After the two brothers approached me about the car they wanted to build, they asked me to be in charge of the drivetrain of the car. I would have to build and assemble the engine, transmission, and rear differential of the new car. After that was done, I would have to help install it and make sure everything works as it should. Soon after, the Dodge Brothers finished their first car and called it the Model 30. The car was made to be better than Henry Ford's Model T, which it was. It was built with more quality than the Model T, and it cost about the same, and it even had more features on it. By 1916, the Model 30 was the second best car on the American auto market. Everyone who worked for Dodge Brothers was always excited to come to work because they worked for one of the best automakers in the U.S. And it stayed there until tragedy struck in 1920. 1920, John Dodge was struck with pneumonia. He suffered from it for weeks. And during that time, it seemed like everyone in the factory felt sad because of John being severely ill. He died later that month of January 1920. Soon after, Horace died of cirrhosis in December of 1920. Now the company was in the ownership of the widows of the Dodge brothers. The widows gave a long-term employee of the brothers the position of running the company. His name was Frederick Hayes. 5 years later, the widows sold the Dodge Brothers company to the Dillon Read & Co. The company suffered hard times since the death of the brothers. Our ranking fell from 2nd place to 7th place, and we suffered severely. But I stuck around because I knew we would come out of the hole.